Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Chris Merrill. I'm here with Jeff Lawson. We're from Panasonic. Happy to spend some time with you. You know, we have been out visiting customers together for the past several weeks and thought it would be interesting to spend some time sharing with you what we have learned as we've been out into the industry and hearing what they're saying. You know, it's interesting whether we're talking to a broadcaster, whether we're talking to someone from a corporate environment, house of worship, education. There's some things that come out that are very common that they're all dealing with. And so we'd like to just kind of share with you what those things are that we've been learning. There are things that they're trying to do in terms of what do we produce, right? What is important there? Whether you're talking to someone from a newscaster or whether you're talking to someone who sits in a CTO office, one of the things they're saying is the quality of what we're producing has to be higher. It was interesting to talk to some of our C-suite executives from enterprise, and they were saying, look, we have to be like what's on television because that's what our audience is looking for. They're expecting the quality of what we put out from a branding perspective to be just as good as when they see us on CNN or any look. We have our internal process has to be like that. They're also saying, look, as we produce, our audiences now are not expecting us to send them a memo. They want the video. And even if I'm in a broadcast, I've got not only my regular channel, but I've also got to do a streaming channel, and I've got to do extra highlights. But the amount of content that I'm producing is just going up and up and up. And I'm having to produce that, push that out into a wide variety of places. Whether that's my standard distribution, whether that's my web, I've got all of these different places that I'm having to put out content. So the burden that's being put on the creative team is just astronomically higher than it used to be. That other aspect of, in addition to what I'm creating, is how do I create that, right? And so that's the second part of what I'm trying to put out there. The team is having to produce this from a lot of different areas. Certainly, COVID has changed the way we produce media, right? So what used to be REMI is now the common way of producing, whether I'm doing a distributed kind of scenario where I've got people in various locations around the country, whether it's in a home or a different studio or whatever, or whether I'm centralizing and I'm bringing that content back into some sort of central location. I've got these different models that I'm used to. I'm not flying everybody into a studio or putting them on a truck. I've got a wide variety of places where I have to have my talent located in order to contribute to that environment. Then in that environment, I've also got to decrease the amount of equipment that's going out there. So where we used to have separate operators and separated pieces of equipment for everything in the production chain, I've now got to consolidate that down. I've got to reduce the amount of complexity, both in terms of the equipment that I have in the chain and also in terms of how I operate that system. Because I've got all different levels of people who are now involved in that. And that's actually one of the key findings is I have to do all of these things, create all of this, and I can't add any more people. In many cases, I can't even find them, right? This is part of the challenge we have. And so these are, regardless of what industry you're in, whether that's the broadcast, whether that's enterprise, any place where you're seeing people create content, these are challenges that we're seeing that are common. So let's take a look at these, a couple of these examples a little more in depth. Jeff, we were just, was it 2 weeks ago we were at MSD and talking to them about what they're producing?
Yeah, we had the opportunity to, and I'm clearly speak loud, so adjust my volume a little bit. So Monumental Sports is one of our customers that we engaged about a year ago with KAIROS platform, and one of the challenges that they had is they wanted to buy the regional sports network, and with the regional sports network they also bought the entire staff that was producing the Caps and the Wizards at that time. And the reason why they bought the regional sports network is that they are opening their own channel. So live sports, esports, sports commentary. They were doing a lot of new and programming with the same staff that they've always had, which was basically supporting truck production from NBA and NHL games. And they, from a greenfield space, they put 4 new studios on the same block as Capital One Arena, and they did not increase the staff, the overall staff. So they were increasing their production by 4 times with the path to go to 4K, and they had to do 4 times the quality, the 4s. They had to do 4 times the quality of what they were doing before with the same staff. And so that was a really huge undertaking. So you buy a regional sports network, you create brand new content so that you create your own channel. You do it with a very complex ability to broadcast, traditional broadcast, streaming, OTT. So how do you do that? How do you do that? All the different pieces that you need to be able to become a channel, create content, and use the same staff that has never done this before.
Yeah, it's a challenging problem that we see, again, as I said earlier, repeated on many industries. We saw the same thing in enterprise. We met with a number of different customers. Certainly it's not a sports arena, but for them, their main auditorium in their headquarters is the arena, right? That's where the key players are. But they're also trying to go into overflow rooms, board rooms. Oh, and I've got another facility in Houston and one in San Francisco. And so I've got to also distribute this same program out to a lot of different folks. Similar kind of analogy. It's not an RSN, but it's that same idea of sending it out. And the fun thing actually for me in walking in, I've seen a lot of broadcast trucks, the inside of broadcast trucks. And as I walked into some of these facilities, their production room looked like the inside of a broadcast truck. But their challenge again was, I can't bring in more people. CEO's asking me for this off the top presentation, but I got to do it with the people I've got.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Have dealt with enterprise customers for decades, and it really was right after COVID. They didn't stop production at all. And some of the early adopters, it allowed them to be able to do their production remotely, but add elements that they never could do before. So it was a breaking point for them. But once they started to invest into the platform, they were able to increase their production quality without complexity and add many elements that you would only see in broadcast. And so their content is king, just like anybody who's watching content. It is the most important thing when you're producing that, so it matters. But they couldn't afford broadcast budgets.
Yeah. So I guess the question that you all may be asking is, why did they want to talk to us? And it was a great opportunity for us to talk to them about a live production platform that we offer called KAIROS that answers many of these questions that they were with. And so let's just take a minute to break down how we were answering those questions for them as we were discussing with them. That first aspect really is the quality of their production. So Jeff, if I'm a KAIROS user, how does that help me to create a better quality program?
So on the quality aspect, and there's a couple of salient points to KAIROS, but when you're looking at quality, first off, you don't have any limitations on your formats. And your interface is the same of any one of the disciplines you would have in your production. So when you look at KAIROS, you look at it as a platform, not just a switcher, because you're able to automate, you're able to put a lot of things together under one user interface. And so you're not having to learn 7 different disciplines, but there's no compromises into how many MEs or how many keyers or how you want to manage multiple outputs.
Yeah, there was a lot of creativity that we were being asked about in terms of, how am I able to program this? And even as you see in this picture, one of the things we're also seeing is in many of these facilities, they wanted to have a stream that was 8K. because you've got a big LED screen that you've got to deal with as well, and that's one of the fun things about it, is to be able to do both that OTT program, the streaming program, as well as that in-studio LED from that same set of equipment. So quantity, right? We talked about MSC having to do 4 times the amount of the content. How are we dealing with that?
So they had a little bit of a cultural shift first as we sort of approached that, and they had freelance TDs that had cut NBA and NHL shows the same way forever. It's sort of like if you understand how to play the piano and somebody gave you a different keyboard. So one of the first challenges was that you can do a standard production with the standard control panel with KAIROS, but you also had the flexibility for someone who is a little bit more adept to graphic programs like Adobe to build a layer base and with unlimited MEs. And that really is where the quantity started to help them be able to produce a lot more shows with the same number of people. No limitations on the number of MEs, no limitations on virtually on the inputs. The only output is strictly bandwidth. But what that enabled them to do was take multiple disciplines from their production needs and have one user interface, and they were able to do a lot more production with the same team.
Sorry about that. Yeah, you talk about that. We talk about that in terms of bringing a lot of production into a single system, but that also gives us, since we've got a lot of locations that we need to produce, there's some flexibility there in terms of how that production goes together. So either distributed, consolidated. Tell us a little bit more about how KAIROS supports those REMI kinds of productions.
And that was also one of the other advantages for our enterprise customers as well as MSC is because KAIROS can support NDI and SRT, bringing in remote feeds was incredibly easy to do on public internet. And SRT is a secure, reliable transport. We can achieve latencies less than a half second. And so being able to bring real time in means that their entire production is not limited to on-prem. They can push out their sources to other REMI productions as well as bring them inside, so they can connect multiple facilities and productions under one roof.
Things I appreciated, they were used to working with Zoom or Teams or one of these other commercial platforms. That was how they were used to creating their show previously, and the ability to still keep that as far as a remote input actually was one of the powerful things that they appreciated, was to be able to send, okay, I can have a remote speaker, I can have somebody in the auditorium, and we can actually, because of latency, have a conversation here, and it works.
In real time, and that was one thing that one of the first adopters of KAIROS, which is LiveX, which are right across the street, and last year they were on stage with us as well, but they were one of the first ones to really show how powerful that you could bring in a REMI and have a live conversation. So they will have on their set, they will have a 4K display and be able to talk in sync with somebody who might be on the other coast, which is pretty powerful because there wasn't anything that KAIROS did besides bring in the SRT and then all the magic inside the box.
Yeah. Very cool. So obviously we also need to reduce the amount of equipment in the production chain, right? We've talked about KAIROS as a platform. Why are we calling it a platform instead of, say, just a switcher?
You know, I think that's probably one of the most exciting things for me. Having spent quite a long time in production, you often have to have a lot of disciplines for different aspects that are not necessarily connected together. But KAIROS, because it's using 2110, gets a lot of freedom. It doesn't have any restrictions on the frequency or the frame rate or the resolution of what you're bringing in. If you wanted to bring in multiple formats and spit out different formats, there's no restrictions. And on top of that, once it's 2110, it's essentially acting as your router. So instead of having a separate system that you've invested into to route your media, KAIROS is doing that for you. And then some of the other points is that, it has a built-in clip player. When we look at Monumental Sports, they had originally decided they wanted KAIROS for the flexibility of production, but they weren't really quite aware of all the things that were in the box. Screen management, an 8K 32 megapixel no restrictions to the size or the dimension of your screen management. So you can have circles and squares and triangles and mullions, and you can make it look any way that you want, and you can put content and map out incredibly easy. One of the other functions is that the clip player, which they were going to invest into an archive and playback system, it's over 4 hours of HD of a very high codec too. And so as those codecs get better, they'll have even more space. That was another device that they didn't have to pay for and to invest into.
Yeah. Hey, let's stick with that MSC example. We talked about all the content they're going, but they had to keep the same team, right? So the other aspect is making it easier to operate. So what are some of the things that KAIROS does to simplify that complexity of just the user interface?
Yeah, and I think I touched on that earlier. The traditional TD wanted to be able to operate the system the way that it was, but what was very interesting was sort of that is a very unique situation because it's a set format and there's a set way of doing it. But they had a challenge where they needed to do a lot of other type of dynamic productions, esports and sports talks and RIMI productions as well. And so what they needed was all of those functions in one user interface and one that was easy to understand. And so the first time I saw KAIROS operating system or the GUI, I thought it was just like the front page. I didn't realize that was the entire backbone. I could see everything on the system with one glance. And I think that that's probably the most powerful thing about KAIROS is that it gives you that freedom, unlimited flexibility, but it's also intuitive and it's easy to do all sorts of productions. So I know that we talked about enterprise and sports, but we have friends in the audience today that are doing unique and exciting things with KAIROS that we didn't necessarily think that that's how we'd use it. It's a case in point that it gives you an incredible amount of creativity because it frees up a lot of the rigid and limitations that we used to bring to the market.
Yeah, one of the fun things that I noticed was, although we associate this kind of a platform with a big button panel, and that's certainly a possibility because that's familiar to some people. I can do a soft panel, I could do keyboard and mouse, I could do a Stream Deck, I could do a remote control, and all of the above together, and so that was fun. I already heard the show. Somebody was telling me they were working on the switcher, and this young person stepped up and watched for a minute, and then kind of elbowed them aside. And 2 minutes later, they were working the whole show and putting things together in a new format because they enjoyed playing with the software.
Yeah, so, and I would just mention one other case studio. We probably all have heard of SiriusXM, right? And one of the things you didn't necessarily realize is that they're huge investment into video. Every single one of their channels has a path to be able to provide streaming video along with the radio. Now they have dedicated audio channels for your car and that sort of stuff, but they have a huge growing audience for those that are streaming and watching content at home. And they are using KAIROS, and in your case in point where you're mentioning how the flexibility of the controls are, they're simply using a mouse and a touchscreen. And they've built their macros to do all their transitions, and all their complex stuff, including PTZ moves, with a press of a button on a Stream Deck.
Yeah, it's been fun to just see the wide variety of applications that people are using this system for, whether it's streaming, whether it's screen management, all of the different broadcast applications that it's been used in. It really is, if there's a live audience and you're trying to share that experience with someone who's remote, then this is a good platform for you. One of the things that I have learned from Jeff over this past couple of weeks that we've been together is how to cross the street like a New Yorker. What you do is you walk out to the very edge of any live traffic, you look to see how fast it's coming, and then you go. And you walk like you own the world, right? And as a result, you're able to get across. And the fun thing about this is I've seen this is really the true for our customers. They're going out to that edge of that unknown. They're seeing, okay, there's stuff coming and I've got to adjust. And they're taking their future in their hands and walking. And I hope that we as Panasonic can be a part of that mentoring of how to get across to survive safely, because we think there's a great future ahead of us. So thank you.